Okay, joining us now to discuss this major development is Joshua Philipp, senior investigative reporter at Epoch Times and host of Crossroads on Epoch TV. So Josh, thank you for joining us today. And the arrest was confirmed earlier today by the Epoch Times, right? So you've been covering the events and the fallout of January 6th very closely over the years, even making a documentary about it titled The Real Story of January 6th. What is your initial reaction to this arrest, the first one connected to the pipe bomb nearly 5 years after the crime took place?
Well, my first reaction is about time because, the pipe bomb incident was kind of the trigger for a lot of what happened on January 6th. And I mean, essentially, this is what happened. Donald Trump was speaking at the Ellipse, the Washington Monument. They had an arranged, organized, permitted, they had city permits, speaking stuff set up to go and speak at the Capitol building. There was supposed to be a speaking event there. It was the pipe bomb that got everything canceled. And so when Trump supporters went to go to the follow-up event, which was scheduled, which they had permits for, which were legal, there was no event. And that's, of course, when everything went down. So the pipe bomb case has been kind of the core piece that's been missing in the entire story on January 6th this entire time.
So Josh, this case has been the center of a lot of speculation, if you will, among Republicans and Trump supporters due to a number of perceived irregularities like a lack of leads in the investigation. So talk to us about these concerns, and does this arrest today put any of that to rest?
Well, I think it puts some to rest, and it raises a lot of other questions. So briefly on that, there's been a lot of conspiracies and a lot of rumors and a lot of suspicions because, frankly, the most key part of the entire story, we've had to wait almost 5 years for. We've had to wait 5 years for the answers on this. And when they were tracking down, arresting people, literally just charged for trespassing, and they were having pre-dawn raids of their homes, doors kicked in, full auto assault rifles pointed to the faces of children when they arrested people and threw them in solitary confinement for years, some of them. They were asking, well, what about the pipe bomb? Why is it you can track down a grandma, but you can't track down the guy who's really the key piece in all of this? What is really interesting, a couple things. Based on the press conference today, we now know that the evidence that they used to track down this person was already there. The leads were already there. They had it 2021 and 2022, and apparently just didn't act on it. So I think that will raise some questions on why that was not made a key priority in terms of the entire investigation. What was the reason for it? What efforts were put into place? Were they not following leads? And why did they prioritize going after people literally charged with picketing and trespassing over this case? The other big thing that came out in some of the early announcements, and this is just allegations, but from the corporate media, they were saying this. They were also saying the individual was motivated by an anarchist ideology. The immediate reaction is, oh, well, was it Antifa? The reality is we don't know. Based solely on anonymous sources, they say motivated by an anarchist ideology. We'll probably get more updates on that. And I think the big other suspicion, and a lot of media reporting had claimed this. The Blaze had a story just recently claiming they identified the person who was responsible. They used the way the person walked, the gait analysis to try to pin the blame on a woman. Turns out she was not the person. That is also not the suspect arrested. But that story was used to kind of paint this idea that maybe it was an inside job. That whole thing is kind of off the table for now, although, again, we'll probably get a lot more answers as this goes forward.
Yeah, Josh, I mean, let's hope some of the questions that you mentioned gets answered as the investigation continues. And I just want to ask you this as well, Josh, because as I mentioned earlier, you've been investigating the events and fallout of January 6th for years, at this point. When making your documentary, The Real Story of January 6th, was there anything you uncovered that surprised you or that you still think needs addressing? Maybe you can just talk a bit about that.
Yeah, well, the reason we called that documentary The Real Story of January 6th was basically because the real story was not being shown. There was exculpatory evidence that would have proven people's innocence that was denied to defendants. There was video footage that was not released to the public that radically changed the narrative. There was evidence being presented, including in courts, that was absolutely false. There were public officials making false claims, saying that Trump supporters killed police officers. That was an absolute lie. They did not kill a single police officer. The only people who died that day were Trump supporters. Ashley Babbitt, of course, shot in the neck by one of the police there. Roseanne Boyland, they claim that she died of, an overdose of the medication she was on. She was on Ritalin. When video footage showed that she collapsed after she was in a crowded entryway, tear gassed, which you normally don't do because it sucks the oxygen out. She was trampled, and then a police officer beat her limp body with a baton. That's not the story the public was told. 2 other individuals died of heart complications. We don't know if there's any wrongdoing or foul play involved with that. They just heart complications, and we don't know what the cause was. They were not police officers, they were protesters. And we still have a lot of answers that were not given to the public. Without a doubt, some of the narratives are true. You absolutely did have some among the Trump crowd who were fighting with police and attacking people. But there is a lot of evidence of abuse and use of force, and frankly, a lot of false statements that were made to the public. The public was heavily lied to about what really took place that day. And the truth is now coming out. Notably, I should add also that FBI Director Kash Patel, we interviewed him in the documentary before he was FBI Director. Of course, he was with the first Trump administration. He knew, he was, of course, very on the ball with this. He understands it. And I do think under his leadership, we're going to get some real answers on it because he was one of the ones calling a lot of this out from the get-go.
Yeah, Josh, we really appreciate you making this documentary and covering this side of the story that is really not covered at all in the mainstream media. I just want to ask you one last question, and more broadly speaking, the Trump administration has made transparency a top priority. It was his campaign promise. So when it comes to Trump voters and supporters, can you just talk about how important is full transparency relating to the events of January 6th?
Well, transparency is extremely important because one of the realities the Trump administration is facing, especially among Republicans and maybe now among Democrats, because of COVID, right? The COVID-19 lockdowns and the vaccine mandates and January 6th and people feeling that the systems of justice were weaponized and the Trump-Russia hoax. A lot of Americans, especially among conservatives, they've deeply lost faith in many of the institutions. The Trump administration, I really do believe they're doing their best to restore faith in the institutions, which I believe is important. I think the American voter, the American people losing faith in the institutions is a terrible thing. Because when you lose faith in the institutions, it means you want something different. You want a new government, basically. I do believe the American system is something that should be saved. I still think it's the greatest system on earth. I hope that we're able to restore it, but I do also think that transparency is really, really important. On the Trump side, of course, Kash Patel, FBI Director Pam Bondi, with the Department of Justice, Dan Bongino, Deputy Director, they're talking a lot about transparency. Trump's talking a lot about transparency. They cleared now the release for the Epstein files. They're saying they're going to be releasing information about, the Trump-Russia hoax. Congress is calling in people to testify about a lot of that. We're probably going to hear a lot more even about the pipe bomb as it goes forward. Why the public was not told about it really, or why evidence from 2021 and 2022 was not followed to actually arrest the guy. These are all things the public is going to want to know. They're saying they're going to give answers to it. I would say, though, I think the reality is inside the house, so to speak. I think the Trump administration is doing their best to have things released quickly. The problem is, I think if they release things too rapidly and they don't follow, if they release evidence of criminal wrongdoing and that is not properly done, where the Justice Department is ready to bring criminal charges based on evidence presented of criminality, that could cause a huge disruption as well. And so I think they are being very careful as they try to balance these two issues, rapidly providing transparency, but also doing it in such a way that doesn't cause more harm than good.
Well, all right, Josh, you always have great insight. Thank you for talking to us. We really appreciate it.
Hey, my pleasure. Thank you.